Let's go over. Let's get started.
Thank you so much, Erica.
And it's recorded, so I can go back.
So I'm gonna call the meeting to order.
Yes.
Select Board Governance Meeting on June 4th, 2024.
All right. Well, good morning. I just have to figure out how to do this part on the screen share. Did Erica leave?
No.
No.
Do you need something?
How do I advance the slides here? Over here. That's right. I just use this as.
I
the
usually
screen.
just go up and down, yeah.
There.
You just.
Okay,
that's
perfect. All right, sorry. You think you know what you're doing. So thanks for having me and welcome back to everyone and thanks for having me back this year. You guys have kind of had a tradition the last several years of getting together shortly after the election to talk about working together and governing and kind of the values and the aspirations you have for governing together. And we've done a number of different exercises with different iterations of the board over the years where we've talked about roles and we've talked about kind of what it means to you to govern well together. And today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the public sector values that we've kind of touched on in prior years. Maybe 2 years ago, I guess Brooke's first governance session when she was somewhere else, remote, I believe. We talked a little bit about disruptive forces and how they impact how you all work together in the community and how you govern together. So we're going to review the values. And then Brooke wants to talk a little bit about the impact of the values and kind of how you all manage the consequences of deciding which consequences prevail. How do you manage the impact of those consequences? And then next steps, a quick check-in on working relationships, and we have 2 hours. So the plan is to get you out of here today by 10:30. So just the typical norms we've used when we've worked together before. So no interrupting, no talking over. It's a small group. It's pretty easy to handle. So thank you very much for that. And with that, why don't we just check in? Good to hear from everybody and let you kind of tell me what you're looking forward to this summer. So just to get your voices in the room, and anybody can volunteer the person on their right to go second. So. All right,
Libby
Libby.
Gibson, town manager. I've been with the town for 5 years. What I'm most looking forward to this summer is playing tennis
Ooh,
and getting the special town meeting warrant whole situation under control and getting the right whale missile slowdown situation under control. And that's it.
the latter one might take up your tennis time.
Janet Schulte, strategic planning advisor, and I'm looking forward to going to the beach.
Something you never could do when you lived in Nantucket.
Walk on the beach up there, and hang out with family and friends.
Nice.
Brooke Moore, Select Board. I'm in my 3rd year of the first time. And I am looking forward to sailing with my granddaughters.
Nice.
Tom Dixon, Select Board, is this strictly non-Select Board stuff? Or
It can be both. I
okay,
mean, Libby did a nice balance, so.
Okay, I just finished my first year and I am looking forward to, I'm gonna be the rank optimist here. Coming to some form of consensus on some in the realm of short-term rentals. For the
All right.
community, whatever can get 2/3.
His glass is 2/3 full, not just half. That's
you.
awesome. I love it. Thank you. Malcolm.
Yes, Malcolm McNabb, a year and a half on the select board. I've had other roles in the town, the board of health before that. This morning, before I came here, I went under the porch and pulled everything out so I could get to my canoe.
Ah,
And this is where I can actually think. And you should all let me be in the canoe as much as possible. I would like, besides my canoe, looking forward to the special town meeting which is sort of the end of the summer. Because I want to go to a party, a cocktail reception, or just walk and shop and stop without someone talking to me about short-term rentals.
All right. I bet.
I'm with those two.
Yeah.
I want to get short-term rentals over. By the end of the summer, I want it over.
Nice. How about for you?
Dawn Holgate, just completed 9 years.
9 years. Congratulations.
And I'm looking forward to Co2 Sundays. I'm enjoying already having both my kids home. And I'm really interested to see how the free bus service pans out this summer.
Oh.
I think that that's going to be great data to have. And yeah,
All right, thank
Big
you.
red or
I'll leave it there.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
From last year or from
Yeah.
April?
From last year.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome. How about you, Rick?
Rick Sears, Assistant Town Manager, golf.
All right.
Like a regular Tuesday for you then. Greg Tibman, also Assistant Town Manager. I guess I have to find out what my canoe kayak is. I don't really have one. I need to find out what makes me happy for the summer, just, on the island, but.
Sandbox.
It's not Cisco. It's not Cisco.
But I'll figure something out there after I set up my short-term rental. And no, I think I'm very excited. We have a new project manager starting who is going to hopefully alleviate some of the PFAS pressures. We'll see where that goes.
All right. PFAS pressure. Awesome. All right, well, we're gonna jump right in then to content and talk a little bit about public sector values. So I call this a refresher because we have handed out this Bridging the Gap document, I think probably every time we've been together, and I hope there's enough for everyone, and if not, we'll get you, somebody's got an extra probably. But the center of it contains the public sector values that was also in your agenda memo that I know came out with your packet. And a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, we talked about the disruptive forces that kind of widen the gap between political acceptability, so what you, the board, want to do, and administrative sustainability, what the town is capable of doing, is resourced to do. And what's important to remember is what gets done lives at the intersection of those two things, right? What you all want to do and what the staff has the capacity to do and what the town has the financial resources to do. So it's a very important intersection. And this gap is getting wider because of disruptive forces, things that challenge your governance. And so they impact local government, they impact local governance, which of course is your all roles. So there's kind of 4 buckets that we put these drivers of disruption in. And the first is kind of national politics filtering into local politics. And I would just call it tone and tenor. It's how people mark themselves. It's the adage, all politics are local, has become all politics are national. We want people to, people are asking for partisan elections for school boards just so they know. Then it's kind of a shortcut to know what you're about if you say which party that you're affiliated with. So it really, it affects how we interact with one another in a certain level of toxicity, frankly, that stalls actual progress. State and local relationships, the state governments kind of infringing on telling local governments what they have to do, really taking local governance away from municipalities, and that's has a big impact on people. Technology, several buckets. Social media, I mean, that is how we just did a survey for another community in Massachusetts that we're doing some strategic planning with. And what the public told their board was that they want to get their information via social media. That's the best way to reach them, is via social media. And if you think about kind of how we in local government have traditionally communicated, it's really stresses us. We aren't necessarily resourced to communicate in the way that people want to be communicated with. So that's a real challenge. But there's also the reality of cybersecurity and that impact on local governments as well, and just the security of things. And then finally, social issues, equity and race, those things are all driving disruption and impact governance. And so because the gap is widening, your all's job is to be intentional about having this understanding that with the decisions you make are ultimately the influence of different choices. And so Rick and I we always have a good conversation when he drives me over from the Nantucket Hotel. He asked me for the shorthand. Now, how is this about governance? How is values about governance? And he's right in that when we think about governance, we so often think about the rules and procedures that you all use to work together. And we'll check in on that because that's really procedural and how you work together. But then there's the underlying values that bring you together, the things that you represent, that you hold dear, and how those impact the choices that you make and the choices that the community makes on important issues. So remembering all of this, I want to share with you, oh, wrong mouse. I want to share with you, how many mice does it take to run a meeting? Kind of this reminder, the 4 values that we've included them in your agenda. But the first is representation or participation. So you have the public that you all represent. Efficiency and effectiveness, we think about that as professionalism. We think about that as kind of a responsibility that the town has to be efficient, to be effective. We think about the importance of social equity, diversity and inclusion. And then finally, justice and individual rights, my rights versus your rights, and they are sometimes going to conflict. So I'm going to share with you a video. It's about 12 minutes long. And he'll introduce himself, but he's a professor from the University of Kansas. His name is John Nalbandian, and I actually recorded this video a number of years ago. And I want you to kind of hear John talk about these values and consider the possibility that every decision you all make as a board is addressing a tension between these 4 values, which 2 values or a tension even within the value, that somewhere in every decision you're making, these values are what you're really making choices about. So we will roll the video. We were just talking about the ad.
Every skill is important because on any given day, we're all mechanics, carpenters, fixers.
Hello, my name is John Nalbandian, and I'm a retired faculty member at the University of Kansas. I had taught for years in the School of Public Affairs and Administration, where we specialize in educating students for careers in local government. So I'm going to talk to you today about some of the foundational concepts in making difficult decisions. I'm talking about political values, the values that conflict and make policy making so difficult. I'm going to do this from an academic perspective, but that perspective is informed by the 8 years I spent on the Lawrence City Council, including 2 years as the council's mayor. So, as I said, embedded in difficult policy decisions, I call them political decisions, are questions of values. Now, these are not personal values like love, honesty, and so on, loyalty, and so on and so forth. These are fundamental democratic values, and there are 4 of them. And I didn't pick these out of a hat. They're pretty much agreed upon in theoretical circles. So the first is the value of representation. That council members are representatives, and there are constituencies, and you are expected to respond to the will of the people. Second, in addition to that value of representation, I add the notion of engagement and participation. The second value is the value of efficiency. And you're familiar with that one. And I add to that the notion of professionalism, so efficiency / professionalism, because I want to convey there and sort of recognize the respect that we have for rational analytical thinking, maybe that goes into master plans and so on and so forth. The third value is value of social equity and understanding of trying to treat all groups as they wish. And the fourth is the value of individual rights, and that may be property rights we could be talking about. It could be civil rights. So I'm going to make some observations about these values, but first I want to talk to you a little bit about a hypothetical case study, and embedded in the case are the values. So let's say that a local government is just completed a new or an update of its Parks and Recreation master plan. Included in the plan is a recreation facility, a new recreation facility that really will be kind of state of the art. And it's a popular piece in the master plan, but of course they're going to need to find a way to fund it. And what they've decided is that they're going to try to fund it with going to a public vote to authorize the issuance of bonds so that they can pay for the facility. The council's on board with this, and they want to proceed with the public vote. But they run into a problem. And they thought it was pretty popular, and it is a pretty popular idea. But apparently in the past, there's been some difficulties with the wording of a previous bond issue, which was explicit about what the purpose of the money would be used for, but also had that sort of default clause or other expenditures as needed, or however that you all are familiar with that catch-all that goes with the bond issue. So pretty standard procedure here, except what happens is a group of citizens come to council recalling that in the past there has been a bond issue or two, I'm not sure what that would be, but where the explicit purpose of the fund, it was of the money was expended for what it said, but then that clause and other expenditures as needed was also invoked. And that was invoked for expenditures that were not related to the primary purpose of the bond issues. And people feel like they were taken advantage of, that it was a way of getting money for something that the council wanted to have done, but didn't know how popular that would be. So the word is that what looked like a pretty popular, this bond issue was going to be passed pretty easily, now becomes contentious. And it is a question of whether or not it's going to pass. So one of the council members says at a meeting, I've got an idea. What if we are very explicit about the purpose of the bond issue, and we also distinguish between capital costs and operating costs? So we say the money for the bond issue, the money that is authorized will be used for capital expenses and only for the capital expenses. And the operating expenses will be paid for by user fees. Now, I know that those of you who know Parks and Rec know that that's not feasible, but nevertheless, just go with me on this one, okay? So the council adopts the pledge and the vote is passed, but it's passed very narrowly. And the pledge, it's attributed, the passage of the bond issue is attributed to the pledge that the council takes. Now, the interesting thing is that originally the council had asked staff for a schedule of user fees, and it seemed pretty reasonable that they could do that. But now, as they're starting to build the project, they run into some problems with the construction itself. The problems are not going to affect the capital costs, but they are going to affect the operating costs. That means the user fee is going to have to be adjusted upward. So, council asked staff for new user fee. The user fee is increased from what it was, and not just by a trivial amount. But what's the council going to do? I mean, they made this pledge, and so they're kind of stuck with what they have if they're going to be true to their word. But they decide in order to promote the transparency that what they will do is they will adopt the user fee schedule, at least the initial user fee schedule, at one of their public business meetings. So comes onto the agenda, and they're ready to make a motion to approve the upgraded user fees, but then there's public comment. In the audience are 20 pastors from local churches. One by one, they get up and they tell the council, if you adopt this new user fee schedule, you are going to systematically deprive a substantial portion of the underprivileged in this community an opportunity to use this facility. It's just not fair. Okay, you're the council. What are you going to do? Are you going to live up to your pledge, or are you going to respond to the equity concerns that's been raised? Well, I know what you're going to do. You're going to do politics, okay? Now, what that means to me is you're probably going to play with the different values that are at stake here, trying to find a way to satisfy both the pledge, but also to accommodate the equity concern. So let's look at the values now in light of the case. The representation value is reflected in the pledge itself, but it's also reflected in the idea that the pastors are representing a group of people as well. So what we see in the value of representation is that within the value itself, there can be conflict, okay? The second value is a value of efficiency, and this is the rationale of what it's going to, the cost estimates and the user fees, and so on and so on and so forth. The third value is the value of equity, and we see that expressed in the pastor's argument. But what's interesting about the pastor's argument is what they do is they are not only talking about an equity concern, but they are asking the council, aren't you representatives of the total community? So what they've done is they've built an argument around both representation and equity. And then the fourth piece is the individual rights. And that, like I said, property rights might be involved in the case, contracts as well. But rights are so fundamental in our society and so powerful that we invent them. And so it may very well be that one or more of the pastors say, don't our citizens have a right to attend and utilize this recreation facility since it's paid for by its taxes? Okay, what on earth are you going to do? All right, here's some observations about the values. And let me go to my notes to make sure I get them right. First, you cannot have all the values optimally at the same time. It does not work that way. And let me give you an example. Do you believe in majority rule? Okay, I know you're reluctant to tell me that you believe in majority rule, but I know you do because you make so many decisions by majority rule. All right. majority rule representation, okay? Now, do you believe in individual rights? Yeah, you believe in individual rights. Okay, now, who are individual rights protecting you from? Yeah, majorities. So what's the balance? What's the appropriate, is there a correct answer for the balance between individual rights and majority rule? Well, if there were, we wouldn't need legislative bodies and rulemaking agencies and courts to adjudicate the various laws that are passed. Second, you cannot ignore any value over a long period of time and not expect trouble. Now, this is particularly evident and easy to understand when it comes to the value of efficiency, but it's also true for the other values as well. Third, efficiency may be, especially like for staff, efficiency, analytical thinking may be your favorite value, but if we're talking about politics and if we're talking about community building, you got to remember, if you're going to understand politics, remember, efficiency is one of four of our legitimate values. If community building is the goal, negotiation and compromise is the character of politics, okay? Us and them has no place in community building. And let me, it struck me, I was thinking about this, and it struck me that at the national level and at the state level, you do not see national reps or state representatives talking about the state or the nation as a community. That term is only used at the local level. So to the extent that local politicians take their model of politics from national or state partisan levels, they're going to be off base. That is not what community building is about. So at its core, politics is about these four values. And the last point I want to make about the values is when you are given alternatives for, either we can do A or we can do B, and it involves controversy, it's very common for you to get down into the weeds to try to understand the technical part of the alternatives themselves. But that's not what politics is about. Politics is about the consequences of the choices that are being made. And what a council does when it votes on a controversial issue where there might be alternatives is to say, these consequences are more in line with our community and where we want our community to be than this set of consequences. Thank you all very much.
All right. John and I have worked together for a number of years. I was a student of his 1,000 years ago at the University of Kansas, and he does workshops with me. And, when we talk about governance and we talk about these values, I always take notes. I learn something every time he talks. And often I'll say to a group when I'm working with them that we work together so much that if something smart comes out of my mouth, it's just John. It's just John in my head and his voice. And we've seen these things, play out over and over again. What really stuck with me today and listening to John was just kind of the reminder that politics doesn't have to be a dirty word. It does not have to be negative. If community building is the goal, that concept of bringing people together, then as long as the conversation is respectful, then it's about negotiation and compromise and figuring out how to address the consequences of the decisions. So just kind of before I turn it over to Brooke, I'd love to give each of you just a chance to kind of, what struck you about John's remarks or kind of anything that kind of was important to you in what he said this morning.
Oh, I'll go.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
We're
no,
taking notes.
yeah, I was thinking about it. No, I think that he said, at the end, he said consequences of the choices you make.
Hmm.
You have to understand what the impacts of those are gonna be. You know, if you don't understand what the choices might do, then I think we're all the way over in representation. You're doing what one side or another wants, but not looking at the whole picture and looking at, you know, everyone's different side. So, and then the other part about it that struck me, the other thing he talked about, and I tell my kids this all the time, when you ignore something, it doesn't go away, it just gets worse. And so sometimes in the guise of effectiveness, we ignore things, and then a year or 2 or 3 later, those things have become a big, huge thing.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes, you know, that's something we do it to ourselves. We,
Mhm.
by ignoring it, going, oh, we're too busy, we can't deal with that right now.
Yeah.
Then it comes back and it's a huge issue. So I think those are things I kind of took out of that.
Good, thank you. Others? Come
Um,
on, yeah.
I mean, I liked when he started talking about sort of being political and that all of the pastors got up and reminded them that if you charge this, you're going to hurt this whole segment of the population. And I think that it shows us that we can't go undecided, that we need to be able to shift and listen.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of being open to something, to new learning at any meeting, even when you think, this is what we've talked about, this is what we've maybe think we've decided, and then there's new information. So what do we do now that we know this new thing? That's great,
But
yeah.
but sometimes there's new information, then it isn't new information. We should still do a betterment. Because then the project will get done and it won't take 20 years, but we bow to the public pressure that's right in front of us. We have a bunch of people there going, we don't want to pay, this isn't fair, and then we put it off, and then we don't get Lover's Lane paved or somewhere else paved. If everyone there had paid $100 a year apiece, the thing would be long done. So you also, there's times where if we've done our homework and we know what the right thing is, we have to have the backbone to stand by it. Even though you're getting all the, you know, you have all the pastors there down you.
Well, and that's really that, when we've talked about roles before, that stewardship role of kind of, sometimes you do have to stand in the fray and know that people aren't going to be happy in the moment, but that it is the best long-term decision. And just because people oppose something also doesn't mean that you shouldn't listen. I mean, there's, you know, there is no correct answer. Or as John said, we wouldn't need you, right? If it was just about the most efficient thing to do all the time, you know, that's that you can hire people to do that. But when you really have to make those choices, it's challenging.
Sometimes you can add a nuance,
Yes.
like a scholarship
Yep.
or
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. How do you make it more palatable? If it's, so in this case of the case study that he uses, if there's a, we're going to isolate people, then the question is not, do we have fees, but how do we prevent the isolation? Can we do something else to mitigate the impact of the
Yeah.
decision? And that then shapes, it shares your values and it shapes who you're going to be in the future. Thank you. That's good. Yeah, Tom.
So I don't understand these places that have abundant land for recreational facilities.
Kansas, yeah, one more land there.
We're not in Kansas.
No, no, and it's something else that got me thinking is, this town council study committee that we're on.
Mhm.
And just the duties and powers, et cetera, of the select board versus a city council, obviously, in Lawrence. And that we have a kind of a different, similar purview, but because of open town meeting and it being the legislative body, we get things to a certain point and then it goes to another point.
Yeah.
And I think it would be different a little bit for us. I don't know, this would be an interesting thought exercise on how it would be different if we were a town council or a city council with a mayor or whatever. What our decision making, because I think in that example, not that we don't have folks come to public comment or email us or pull us aside in the grocery store, like Malcolm said before,
Mhm.
and say such and such, but maybe our decision making would be different.
Yeah.
And I also think of, and I know some of us have talked about this in meetings, in like who serves, who is able to serve, representation. The ability, if you're, I've been thinking a lot about this, if in a different form. There's only so much, it takes a lot of time to do this kind of work. And I think that we're constrained a little bit by, well, I'm gonna say, I'm constrained a little bit because you know, that there's other things going on and also, well, all of us are constrained by it, so all things in our lives. And I think that if thinking about it being a year into my select board term, that if we were the legislative body as well, there's even more to consider, because there's certain things that like town meeting sort of rounds off on the edge, where it's like, okay, we got it to, like I said before, we got it to a certain point and then town meeting will adjudicate that.
Yeah.
And I just think that's an interesting kind of governance question as this committee moves forward. Anyway, there's just sort of
Yeah.
some random thoughts that I'm thinking about as this committee goes forward.
Well, and I mean, it's very true. If you think about some of the warrants that you all recommended action on. And but it's up to town meeting to decide. And if you had been, like you said, if you were the deciding body, would the decision have been different? Thank you.
Kind of what Matt and Don was saying too. What struck me is just being aware that not all values are equal at the same time in any given situation. So you do have that political balance. They're there, but you have to weigh them.
I think the specific example kind of makes the decision even extremely difficult. What if you took this in the context of all the decisions you make as a select board, and if you've been exercising these values across a wide range of decisions, this decision may be different. You might say, well, we are going to have to raise user fees, but in the past you made an investment in the No Big athletic field so that there can be a men's soccer league for less privileged people on a Sunday. So I kind of feel like you're being forced into a really difficult question to answer here, because you're not evaluating the values across all the decisions you make. And then on top of that, I fire the town administration for getting the user fees so wrong and creating this problem.
Yeah. Way to go, Rick.
I said,
Always a great solution.
But I think if you do what Don says, which is, okay, we're gonna, you know, we're gonna tier the fees, or we're gonna give some, you know, we're gonna give some scholarships to people to mitigate this. If you found the answer, once you have the answer, then it's easy to, you know, to tell people what you're going to do. Once you've done the work and know the answer. And I always go back to Sherman Commons. That when I was on the board, we got so much pressure on that. Libby got so much pressure to make it right for everyone who was there and everything else. And we didn't bow to the pressure. We held off and said, because we didn't want to negotiate against ourselves. And we ended up with something that's a really, you know, for pennies on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar, something that benefits the town. Whereas if we had, you know, if we had bowed to that pressure and not said, no, we've got, you know, there's other things that can happen here and we're going to do, you know, we're pursuing those. If we had, you know, bowed, we would have had, it wouldn't have turned out as well. If the town had taken it over, the town would be struggling there too. So I do think, you know, there's times when you know the answer, then you know, you think you have a good path. It's easier for all of us to stick on that path. You know, but when we're split and we haven't quite figured it out, that's, I think, you know, when the community's split and we're all split, it's hard to hold.
Yeah.
So.
So for me, the values-based conversation or dialogue around decision-making brings it to a level where you're out of the weeds and you're really talking about something at a higher level that serves both to help you arrive at a conclusion, but also to help the community understand the conclusion you've arrived at. That, you know, why we prioritize this value over that value in this decision. And I think, you know, for me, that's part of a really important part of this, but to me, the most important thing that came out of this was politics not being a dirty word. Like I was so resistant to when people would would say to me, oh, you've gotten really political, and I was like, oh, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, and now after watching this, I've been saying to people, yes, my job is political. And politics to me is defined this way, and people say, oh, that makes sense. And it is about evaluating relative priorities and relative values. That's what politics is.
Yeah.
And hopefully building community rather than dividing community. So,
How about you, Malcolm?
Well, it goes down to, the values. Everything we do affects somebody. And, as a very prominent person on this island, who I think would be an excellent select person, who said absolutely no way. Because I know it will affect people's lives. And I've been thinking about this, when I was more involved in medicine, I would make decisions that it made a difference in people's lives. And was consuming. Now, this job is consuming.
You need your canoe.
Just forget the meetings. The time you think about things, the things you read, I'm constantly thinking about it. Everything we do affects someone's lives. Simple things, where we put a utility pole. Who we put on a board or a commission is gonna affect someone's lives. And, so I think that's the basic moral thing we have to remember. Whatever we do on the board of health, if we have food truck regulations, it's gonna affect people's livelihood. If we have camp regulations, some of our kids aren't gonna have the summer. Everything we do affects someone. So it's not just building community, it's really affecting the life of the community. And I think whatever we do and every decision we make, we always have to remember that. If we think it's a little decision, it's going to affect someone, and it might be significant, that little decision.
Well, I'm glad it resonated with all of you. I don't know, Libby, did you or Janet, do you want to add anything?
I kind of take something from everything that people said. I really like him.
Yeah, he's
a
great.
lot. And I like that he speaks sort of plainly and not in like professor language. But I also like the way he sort of, when you're considering a big project or a policy decision or regulations or something like that, consider these things and sort of go through them a bit in your discussion. And I don't know that we do that a lot.
Yeah.
We should probably do a little more.
Yeah, be a little more intentional about
Yeah.
what is the
Yeah.
value. Some places, people will vote, and I mean, there's not always a reason for everyone to speak, but certainly for people to understand how you came to your conclusion is a little bit about sharing your values. So sometimes we, in the interest of efficiency and time, we sometimes cut that short.
Yeah, I think what happens, I'll use like the whole discussion of the sewers way back. That was really contentious and it was really difficult. And I think by default, we actually went through everything. And then once we got that in place, they've run relatively smoothly. Because we did look at all the different sides. We didn't just say, oh yeah, we'll have to do this, and went off and picked one side. We actually had the long exchange and all the different views and had all the numbers, and it was a lot of work. But I look at that now as a success from 15 to 20 years ago, that has held.
I think the only thing that I would add that John didn't mention is that no matter how strong a community you build, you're always gonna have somebody on the outside who's mad. And that it's always gonna be part of the experiences. You don't pick somebody off, you're not doing your job. And that's
Yeah.
part of what is gonna be really difficult in the decision making, is you can have 95 people say yay, and the other 5 are gonna be really loud and really annoying.
Well, and that's the part about there's never a perfect balance among all the values, and for people who the value that's being less prioritized is really important, they're gonna be.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about your, I've got a picture for you. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, should I show it?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, here we go.
Um, when Julia and I were talking and planning for this meeting about this idea, the thing that had just happened was that tree decision on Cooper Farm Road.
Mm.
And we were talking about decision-making and governance and values, and I said, that was like this choice. We had people who were 100% tree and people who were 100% house. And we had a tree and a house, and something was gonna go. It was either the foundation eventually or the tree had to go, right? And that was like as clear a sort of a binary choice as possible. And so and we heard arguments, property rights, value, you know, and then trees are the most important thing and we should never ever cut down a tree. We have it, you know, and that just really was echoing in my mind when we were talking about this values-based decision-making. That's probably as clear cut a decision as comes before us in this regard, right? Because there was a winner and a loser, the house or the tree. It's way more complicated 99% of the time than that even. And so, I mean, that was sort of the inspiration of where we went with the direction with this meeting. And then once you've made the decision, what are the consequences and how do you mitigate them? Do you offer scholarships for user fees? Do you make them plant? How many trees need to get planted in place of the tree that's being taken down to mitigate the consequence of removal of an older tree? Or if we decided tree, what can you do for the person whose sewer line is being crushed by the tree's foundation is there a role for mitigating that? If the tree wins, the value of the tree is the presiding value. So anyway, I just thought it was a really sort of, I would say green and white example of, you know, what we face every day. And that's way more complex usually. So anyway, that was.
And so talk a little bit then kind of about what this leads you to want to do.
Sure. Yeah. So I feel this, this sort of division in the community around the future. And I see efforts to, and I don't want to create terminology because I don't want to define it yet. But it feels like we're at an inflection point of where are we and where are we going? And I have to say, like I happened to pop on Facebook, showed up, and there was a post from someone just talking, I'll read it. It's from Rachel Dixon. I feel like Nantucket is broken. The ferries are canceling. It's almost impossible to get your car inspected. Dental hygienists, dog groomers aren't available. Half of our electric cables broke. This is really concerning. So there's this angst about where we are, where we're going, and I think the short-term rental debate is a nexus for that. And even last night, when the proponents really were asked to talk about what their goals were, in essence, they were being asked to say, what do they value about the community and how are they trying to address those values in this issue of short-term rental regulation or lack of regulation or whatever. And I have just had this idea that as a community, we need to have a big picture conversation. And it's not master planning, it's not concrete things, it's a values-based conversation that I would like to have across the community. And my great imagination, this is a year-long project where we make sure we engage everybody from the seasonal community, the year-round community, that we have opportunities for engagement around a 12-month period where people's time, whenever they're available to participate, we make it so we're not choosing between summer and winter or spring or fall like we often do with things like that, and really do a community engagement project that is around this kind of values-based model. Because I think if you start here, we're starting from the, people are trying to address their concerns by swimming pools and, you know, concrete things from the ground up. And I feel like we're not having that higher level conversation in the community. So it's just something I've tossed out as an idea. For us, maybe as we move into strategic planning, to think about bringing this kind of dialogue to the broader community. And see if it builds community in a different sort of way, more inclusive. Mixing people who don't mix with each other in conversation, in different, you know, settings and methodologies, surveys, charrettes, webinars, online, in person, you know, anyway, it's just my wild idea.
So, Brooke mentioned that, you know, and I will say she was passionate about, this is what I want to do, this is how I want the year to look, and, you know, go, and then it's like, all right, well, that would be a cool thing to do. And what do the rest of you think? No, what would it look like? Is that a conversation that you all want to lead the community through, engage in kind of island-wide, about values and consequences?
What's the
So-
end point of it?
And I'll ask you to address the, you know, the questions and,
Yeah, I mean, at the end, what do we have?
I think better understanding of each other's perspectives, and which then might lead to more collaborative decision-making and more collaborative understanding from the broader community of the complexity and how things all fit together. Because we're hearing different perspectives. So I see that, you know, somebody has a priority on an issue and they push, and they don't understand where it bulges out to another part of the community. And I think just bigger, this is about sort of the underpinnings of long-term planning. It's a values-based understanding of where do we want to be as a community. It's not a vote, but I think it fosters a different type of communication, a different type of problem solving, a different type of engagement in the direction that we're going on a more, and also to inform all of our decision making and prioritization on town administration side, and also from the political side, from our side of the table. It's not a report, I mean, maybe it is a summary of the conversations come out of it, but I think we improve engagement in the bigger picture rather than the small individual priorities.
I think what you're describing was the comp plan 20 something years ago. And that's what we did. And that's what happened. Everyone was invited. There was talk of limitations, there were which some of this wasn't popular, but it was talks of limitations, there were talks of, you know, the cost of growth, and it's not gonna come at once. You're gonna go and then you're gonna get hit with it like we're seeing now. There was talks of what will happen with housing and how are we gonna house people, and it led to some good things. But what I've seen is some of those decisions have slowly been eroded over the past 20 years, with people having interest contrary to them, have slowly eroded. And things like the tree that we talk about around the corner here, that, you know, citing the parking the way they did is contrary to what Building with Nantucket Mind says. You know, so we're making decisions, and so we're making problems for ourselves by not following decisions we've already made before. And we're not following them because people are in a hurry, or they don't understand them, or they're overwhelmed, or all different reasons. Pick a reason. So I think that the framework is there. I think it needs to be updated. When I was on NP and EDC, I kept pushing for, you know, once a month, bringing one topic up and having that discussion on that one topic. I didn't get anywhere, so I threw my hands up and left. So I think what you're describing is, you know, is a good process. I don't know how we'd fit it in, you know? And the other thing we did on the comp plan that I thought was successful is we didn't just have a vote on it, we came to consensus on all the different topics. We came to consensus, we threw things out. So, you know, and everybody that was involved signed up except Arthur DeRoche. Arthur DeRoche said, you know, who was involved at the time, said, take my name off this. I don't want my name on it. Okay, we'll take your name off. But we had 300-400 other people kept their names in it. You know, nobody agreed with everything, but people came around to a good amount of it. And a lot of it has turned out to have been pretty, you know, pretty predictive. The traffic that we're dealing in the places that we're dealing with it was all predicted, you know, so it was all on the, you know, little on the sheets. And so I think, you know, and then the other, my why, and the first thing that, so that's just sort of in general, my first wise ass thing to say about that is I'd get rid of the tree and park a car on it. That's the Nantucket, that's our values, is let's knock down the tree and then we can line a whole bunch of cars on that parking, on that.
So
You
it's
know.
still not about walking on the sidewalk.
Well, not exactly, like, because we park cars everywhere. And so then my point is, it's sort of, you know, we leave the trees, but if we get rid of the trees, we'll park cars on it, you know, so.
And maybe it is a comp planning process that introduces the values thinking into it, you know, I don't know, this really struck me as a way to bring people together so they can hear why they want what they want, right? And how that, what they want potentially impacts someone whose priorities are different from theirs. And I think we tend to go issue to issue to issue rather than seeing it more holistically. And I just think there's value in that, in both building community and providing a framework to underpin decision-making across the government and the community.
Yeah, I think there could be a lot of value to that. Put aside for a second what the medium is and when and how many of them, but to continue the theme of our talks in the grocery store with constituents, right? There's so many of the individual, each of us have, town staff included, right? And somebody asks you a question, you explain, oh, well, that's what happened with the tree, or, you know, whatever. I don't know if it would be value to have some sort of, you know, mini forum sort of, maybe not like exactly like what the Civic League does, but something like that, where a couple times I'm just totally thinking out loud, a couple times a year, we you know, we're available to ask questions, or we accept questions, and then we kind of go through I don't know. It's sort of maybe like maximizing public comment or something like that at a regular meeting. I just think that those individual, my bottom line is what I'm trying to say is those individual conversations that we all have to get out that information. How can we get that out into, you know, like, do we need a column? I don't know, but.
We had those forums, you know, the same people are gonna show up.
That's true.
I mean, there's a whole core of people that seem to speak for the community, but it's those people that we don't.
That's the point of.
I would like to get at those meetings.
Yeah.
Because they sometimes are a little more rational.
Well, and I think what I hear a lot is, I don't know how to know what's going on because there's so much going on. There's that. And also, to me, this is more of a listening than a talking to opportunity. And engaging, really, really engaging the communities that struggle to find a voice. Whether that's time, knowledge, money, whatever, you know, whatever resource is short for them that allows them to participate, right? So, you know, on my, you know, my nonprofit world, we pay people to fill out surveys because the people who want to participate, if they're taking an hour to do a survey, they're not working for an hour, right? And so recognizing that kind of thing. So there are, you know, there's a lot of people saying they don't know or they don't feel heard, and I just feel like if we made a really, really intentional and concerted effort to allow people to feel heard and have the conversation at this level, where I think it could be a game changer for the community, honestly. Because I feel us splitting and getting more and more siloed by priority issues for people or values. You know, and the value might be to someone, I need to make as much money as possible so I can ensure my kids go to college and I have the retirement. I don't care about the impact on the community. Or I have everything I need and I value the environment above all else. And you know what I mean? Like, just hearing each other in a different way and having that led by us, I think would be.
You know, you said about information, so something I've heard at the town council study committee is, oh, well, if we had a town council, everybody could just watch one meeting and they know everything that's going on. And like, okay, maybe, but there's a lot of trade-offs and things to work out in that massive calculus for that, so. But putting that aside, I think that ties into like, people like, oh, I can't digest all this stuff. Yeah, just an aside.
And we do keep hearing from the same people, and I want to understand the values of the people we want.
Well, I mean, we had a town meeting, there's 200 people deciding the fate of, 17,000 people.
And we-
2,000 people come out to vote with 10,000 registrations, so there's.
And there's a filter. There are those of us who have we're filtering and prioritizing what gets put before town meeting, right? With the exception of citizen warrant articles. And I think we're seeing more and more citizen warrant articles because people don't know. I think sometimes it's they don't know how to get their voice heard so that their priorities get addressed by all of us. And sometimes it's people who have a thing that we've decided isn't a priority and they're not taking no for an answer. I think there's both, but I'm seeing citizen warrant articles that are kind of almost silly. It's almost like, well, why didn't you just come talk to this department head or this committee about, or one of us? They skip to citizen warrant articles, I think, because there is a missing level of engagement. I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, we've been talking for a while about having kind of these yearly or quarterly meetings with other boards and how this kind of effort would tie into like the planning, updating the master plan and not duplicating efforts, but trying to get them that level of engagement that maybe they're not getting as well.
Excuse me, and strangely, our as evidence when we were at MMA and talked to the select board chair and vice chair of Andover, and we were telling them about town meeting and our voting rates, and they're like, oh, that's like amazing. You guys are like crushing it. Plymouth just had their town election was like 12%. So I don't know, I guess it's all relative. How do you judge this stuff? I'm not.
Because that was my question. How do other communities are having the same discussion or? Is this unique to Nantucket? What we're talking about or?
Well, I mean, if the question is about having a values-based conversation, I think that is a unique thing to put out there, to take a step back and say, let's really have a conversation about our values as a way of engaging people in a future conversation about the strategic plan. I think the intentionality and the use of the term values in this framework would be relatively unique. It's interesting though, kind of when you contrast it with the idea of participatory decision-making, because we can sit there and say only a couple hundred people are making the decisions. And yet when 1,600 people come, it's chaos. And that's still not everybody making the decision, right? And so, could you manage 5,000 people coming to make a decision, what would that really look like? Is that the type of democracy?
So you're
That makes
suggesting
sense.
we do something other than town meeting?
Oh, no, I'm just saying it is the conflict of the values of efficiency, one meeting to hear everything versus representation, everybody participate. So I'm not suggesting that. It's
We're
just.
gonna need that rec center to accommodate.
We need that rec center, exactly. Yeah,
That's all.
exactly.
What I hear is people, they want two different things. One is they want the pothole cleaned, or they want the pothole fixed, or the flood in front of their house to go away, even if it's not our responsibility, town's responsibility, or whatever. They want that, they want the basics done, and they say a lot of this, talking with values, why are we doing that? We can't make the trains run on time. That's one kind of thing, and the other thing is, I hear a lot of is, we don't enforce what we have now. Just enforce your current rules, just do what you're supposed to do now, and then we can talk about this. So, and I think some of the people that are saying just enforce this or that, they don't feel like they are heard. They feel like they send emails and they don't get responses. They speak up and they share their concerns about, sort of growth on the island, the things that have impacted them, and they feel like that is being ignored. So I think that I think if we are gonna do it, I almost think it has to be more targeted to specific topic in a way, because I think the big overarching could end up just being a bitch session, I think we almost have to be more on, focus it somehow. I don't know how to focus it, but I think it has to be focused more on something, or it could be the same old voices coming and complaining about the same old things. How do you turn it into, how do you position it so it becomes, does the staff have time and ability to even do it right now, would be my first worry. And then number two is if we are gonna do it, how do we position it so it becomes, so it's small enough that it can, focused, small as the word, focused enough that we get something meaningful out of it and it does what you hope it will do. It brings people together, doesn't split them even further.
One of the things that John does when people are having a conversation, they drill into the thing, he will say, so this is the smart thing coming out of my mouth, that's just John. He will say, if that were an example of something, what is it an example of? So kind of because people they go to paint or paper,
Yeah.
seed or sod, something I can relate to, the choice I'm gonna make. So then it's like, okay, well, what is that an example of? And how does that reflect, your values in those decisions?
Why are you concerned about that?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think, to me, I just had this thought, like, we think of Nantucket as a community, like we cherish the community aspect, the small town, value, the ideal, right, of us being this year-round community that is there for one another, et cetera, et cetera. And I think as we grow, the opportunity to chat and get to know each other and understand each other's values gets lost, right? And this is to me a way to try to circle back around to that level of conversation. So we're really acting like the small town or the community that we value or profess ourselves to be, that somehow I feel like is getting lost as the issues get bigger, more expensive, and I am not without hope that we can bring that back. And I think that's what I'm thinking about in this. And maybe it's a little pie in the sky, but we get so caught in this issue and get this project done and that project done, that I fear that we lose this sense of common purpose. And I think that's what I'm sort of trying to get back, is balancing values in a way of getting a sense of common purpose.
The split that we have has been here my entire life. I remember in the 60s, 70s, the Island Sounds Trust legislation, the Kennedy bill, that was a 50-50 split. And sort of the one side, the let it rip side, you know, what, that's not the right way. One side was anti-Kennedy bill because that was taking rights away and we, you know, we won't have this and we won't have that. And then the other side was, oh no, that would be great. It would help you out. And it was like a 50-50 vote. So this, you know, that kind of dynamic has been here as long as I can remember.
Is it inevitable?
I think it might be.
I mean, I worry that I see so much. I don't know, some of the players, I just don't know that they would engage in something that's really open and honest like this. I just see such a high degree with the amount of wealth that has come to this island of lawyering up and writing long letters to the editor that are crafted to be divisive. And I just don't know that, you know, since the beginning of this short-term rental discussion, I've been asking, what problem are we trying to solve? And nobody's really answered that. Not honestly. I don't think.
Closed
Maybe
last
they
night.
did last night, but
I think we heard a little bit of that last night from.
good.
people.
I'm gonna go back and watch
And
that. but-
Granicus sent a bunch of stuff that explained it too, that your group read early on. Anyway,
I'm just, I just worry about, would we be able to actually bring in people into truly open, honest engagement?
And it's a great idea, but staff time, our time. What's gonna happen at the end? We still, like as Don said, we're the same people. I don't. Great idea, I just wanted to make
It's so
sure
sad.
we don't spend a lot of time and at the end of it, just
I mean, I do like the idea of doing like a public session where we actually do answer the questions rather than our normal public comment. And that is a little bit like the Civic League Summer Forum, which I personally think we should just be hosting ourselves.
Yeah.
we should have more than just one of those.
Yeah, maybe like once a month or something.
Every other month, whatever. That's really important, because that, I think that. I think that would be the most productive thing we've come out of that. We really had time to answer questions.
We would need staff support.
I was about to say, what if we don't know the answer?
Right?
Or like me, we're saying the wrong thing half the time.
I don't always know. Sometimes there is no answer, sometimes we could almost answer before,
With the picture of the
With
tree.
the picture of the tree and say, well, we have to decide between these four.
So
Tree
let
or
me,
pot?
let me circle back to, is there value in our getting more, doing more work on this in our strategic planning process, for instance, just within our group, that we can model this and maybe do it more consciously and out loud in our decision-making process to model it for the community. And we start there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, would you guys ever consider going through this exercise, just like you'd like to do with the town, as amongst yourself and coming up with a straw man for people to react to, as opposed to this notion of going out to everybody and some of the skepticism that comes with that. But figure out for yourself, I'm asking, by the way, just figure out for yourself what your values are and see if it, I mean, I don't know, just
Yeah.
a way to do it without involving the entire community right off the bat.
Give something to react to.
Strong to react.
Yeah, example, like that works for short-term rentals too. It's like, okay, this is the case.
It's a case study. Yeah.
How does that impact this family's use of their property? And I think that's probably gonna be.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, I'm grasping for a way to I mean, this is how I make decisions. Like this is, I know I'm very conscious of this and I didn't know it until I saw this video. And I just think it's worth talking about. Well, you kind of have the same reaction, right? That
The same reaction.
that it was just interesting to look at it from this perspective.
Yeah.
In terms of decision making.
Yes, I mean,
I'm not looking to add a ton, I don't know, I was thinking more of an engagement with a consultant to do some work, not burdening staff with it. It would be outside of.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was gonna say. I don't know if this is applicable. I'm not making a direct comparison, but at AHT, Affordable Housing Trust, for the year-round deed restriction, we had Judy Barrett come in and she did a bunch of focus groups that were confidential. And then a report came out and we never saw who said what and who was in those meetings. But a lot of good feedback did come out of that we took into finalizing those documents. So I just sort of throw that out there as, would that be helpful for us? Maybe.
Right, well, I mean,
Yeah, the idea of modeling, I think too, is kind of, that is an ask of yourselves, kind of, so, okay, well, if we did this, if we spoke to the value, when we came to our conclusions, if we also then said, this is the value that I'm, weighing in on here and why it's more important than this value in this moment and in this decision for these consequences, it changes the dialogue. And so like when you were asking, would people be willing to have an authentic conversation? That's a question for yourselves, because every time you put the straw man out there, somebody's gonna tear it apart. Because it's not their values profile. You can be assured your values profile will not be everyone's in their entirety. And so there's vulnerability that's required even for yourselves to have that type of conversation.
And that goes back to the point I was making about the impact of federal decision-making on local. communities by partisan politics. at the local level.
Right, that's right.
I want to just make two observations. If you do go this route, it needs to be more than just more community forums with some of people. You gotta be reaching the people who are on the lawn, cleaning the houses, and all that stuff. And the word I haven't heard this morning is trust, which could be a major outcome of this whole process. Trust between the people in the community, amongst you all, and between this board and. And that's it. I mean, it's not real, not a lot probably damage, but I think it's a real strong operative word and it will.
it's interesting you say that, because when I think about the cry for transparency, and I respond to that cry by saying, my God, every meeting we have is a matter of public record. Everything we do is a matter of public record. How accessible it is to the average person is another question. And I'm not sure. I think trust and transparency are being interposed on each other. And with a lack of trust, everything lacks transparency, because there's an assumption that something, if you don't trust, there's an assumption that there's information that is being provided. I don't trust the decision. Something must have happened that I didn't know about. There must be a conspiracy or something happening behind the scenes, because I don't like the outcome and I don't trust how we arrived at the outcome.
The window becomes translucent instead of transparent.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good insight, Jen. I think you've captured maybe some of what I'm trying to get at, and I wasn't articulating.
The people that don't trust feel like they haven't been heard. And
Right.
some of them will continually put their, they'll write long letters and they'll contact us by email, but they still feel like it isn't moving the needle at all. No one's even acknowledging it. And they don't feel like their voice is being part of the process. I'm with one of the short-term rental groups. We've sat down with, this is gonna take a lot of time. We've sat down, and the reason I say that is we've sat down with all different sides on the short-term rental, and it's a couple-hour conversation with each person or each group. So we've, in the past week, we've probably spent 30 hours trying to understand what the individual groups are doing and, presenting and why they're presenting it, and, what would they you know, would they look at it another way? And, you know, have you thought about it this way? And doing those conversations is, you know, is intensive. You know, but I feel like I have an understanding for where everyone is coming. I'm not sure we're gonna be able to craft something that's gonna make everybody, you know, that is gonna make everybody happy. Hopefully something gets to 2/3. But I do think that process has built trust between, you know, groups that necessarily don't trust each other. It's not a, you know, not a big piece of trust. It's a little bit of trust. But I think we're trying, and I think it's, anyway, it takes a lot of effort to have people heard, and they have to tell you, you know, when I teach my employees, we have to teach them 5 times, we have to say 3 times, 3 different ways, or with some of them, it's 5 times, 5 different ways. So you gotta say it 25 times till they get it. It's gonna be the same sort, what you're asking is that sort of thing. And I don't know how we,
Can I comment a little bit about that? The concept that people aren't being heard, I think is multifaceted. I don't know really quite what the word is, because I think they quite firmly feel that way.
Mhm.
Because what they're saying is not necessarily happening. And that in like maybe the administrative level is different from not being heard. So just let's go back to the fire chief for a second. I heard a lot of people say, we're not being heard because what they wanted didn't happen. And it wasn't because they weren't being heard. And the process was very open, very transparent. We talked about it extensively. And people wanted something else. And they put forward misinformation and campaigns for personal attacks and a lot of very unpleasantness that resulted from that, and in some avenues is continuing to happen. So it's not totally that they're not being heard, it's what they want didn't happen. Which I just think is different.
Yep.
Code,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
that's
code.
very
They're not
true.
listening
That
to
is
me.
true,
I'm not
yes.
getting what I want.
Yeah.
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 And to some degree, I think elevating the conversation to a different level may help people understand how decisions get made beyond, you know, because when you step back to values and priorities, right, even in that situation, right, we were evaluating a certain, you know, certain things in terms of choosing a chief or whatever, and elevating it or teaching a different way of looking at contentious issues provides an opportunity to step away from this and maybe talk a little bit more of how we got to a decision like that. You know, it's a little bit process, it's a little bit, you know, and so that there's a better understanding of why. I mean, the other topic, you know, I'm steeped in right now is the hunting association, and you know, that you know, relying on a town meeting vote that happened 6 or 7 years ago as like the communities behind this was 6 or 7 years ago is not today. And so many things have changed, and our priorities, our resources, our priorities, our values shift in that kind of time frame. It really does shift. And stepping back and being able to talk to that group at a higher level about has helped bring them along from being really angry and frustrated and feeling like they got a raw deal or we abandoned them, to helping at least their leadership understand the shift that led us to where we're at and how it fits in the big picture. And those conversations take time and they're harder to have, for sure. We're not going to do that on every issue. But I guess that's just kind of an example of where this kind of dialogue gets applied and it hopefully leads to not having, 5 people stand up and.
Well, you can't do that conversation on a Wednesday night in front of a camera. It would not be
Right.
fruitful. It would end up being, people talking past each other. And that is one of the difficulties. Some of the rules that are in place for us are, sort of like the procurement rules are not to protect the taxpayers or us. It's to protect, the big businesses that know how to, that give a lot of money to the politicians to put those rules in place. And so I think with these sort of things, it's hard to have those honest discussions within the rules that we have.
So you and I can have a really interesting conversation about values around procurement.
Yeah.
And how you view it and how I view it.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know if there's value in this
Yeah.
at all, but I just thought it was, it's an opportunity to engage in decision-making a little bit more transparently from that point of view.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
One of the things we started trying to do after the inception of the strategic plan, which I guess we're in like year 6 now, right?
Wow.
Was to try and bring decisions back to an item in the strategic plan and why that impacts that and fits in with that. We could possibly do a better job when we do make pretty important decisions in executive session, when those are disseminated to the public, of doing a little bit more of a presentation on how we got there. Within reason, because there are privacy issues with like contracts. And that kind of stuff.
Well, 31 Western, right? It stands out as an example for me, where we were not sure what the community's values were on that
Mhm.
choice, right? The value of historic preservation, of retaining the asset, and we basically put that decision on the voters. And it was almost like they were mad. We asked them, why did you do that? And I think you got up and tried to explain why we presented this decision, because we weren't sure. We didn't have a good sense to make that decision for the community. Part of it, frankly, for me, was covering my butt, right? Like, to ask the voters what they thought, because I didn't feel comfortable making that decision for them, and I think underneath all that, it's because I wasn't sure what they valued more.
And we probably would have gotten attacked if we hadn't presented it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that really was as value-based a decision, like,
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
anything that we had on the warrant.
And there was so much information that was missing. We didn't know what the
Right.
septic issues were. We didn't know what the condition of the building was, all kinds of stuff that we didn't find out until different iterations of time, all the way up to the week before town meeting.
But what we did learn was the community didn't value the asset enough to overcome the price tag or the lack of information, right? So that was
Yeah.
information.
I mean, there was probably a big constituency that just couldn't stand the idea of Blue Flag making a profit.
Totally.
Regardless
And that's a value
regardless of the value of the asset
Yeah.
itself.
So, I don't know, I just think it's an interesting frame, maybe I'm overreaching.
Yeah, so where do you, just sensitive to time, kind of what would you say, is there a next step? Was this just a good conversation? Is there something you want to do as a board? How does this relate to governing together?
Well, my values of accountability and efficiency tell me I'm concerned. I like the idea, except it's gonna take time. We have a consultant. We'll need another consultant. And I'm not sure at the end what we're gonna have. I like the idea of having more question and answer sessions like the civic meeting. I think we should do that, and you're right, we should give it a swing at the civic meeting. I think we should do 2 of those a year, 4 of those a year.
I mean, that could be something that could tie into if we, say, have meetings with other boards as well, where there's a full panel of people that, where there would be an open question period.
And in the sense of those question and answer periods, we can challenge the people too, though, say what, you know. We get that feedback. I have a sense of what I'm here. Because like I said before, it's gonna be the same people.
Well, to me, it's, if we're gonna try to do more community engagement, we have to be really thoughtful about actually reaching out to underrepresented or undervoiced segments of our community. Or at least scheduling these things at a time that's accessible, or at different times so that we can reach different constituencies, like on a weekend or, you know, or in February.
Or in a place where they get.
Or in a place where they go.
Yeah.
It could be topic specific, like say we talked about the rec center, you're
Yeah.
gonna bring in a whole another. And we, when I was first on the board, we used to do one meeting a month that was a workshop and it was only on one topic. And then we were kind of running out of topics, or we abandoned it at one point where it was just like, okay, this other business is piling up. But maybe we could bring something like that back where you pull in different people from the community on one specific issue.
The other
And
thing
it's more of an open.
The other thing, I think what is happening, people are all busy and they're hoping that we'll solve it for them. A lot of times what ends up with us is, hey, look, we have a lot of us and I'll pick on the rec center. We want a rec center, guys, figure it out. You know, and they think, oh, we'll just put it on town meeting and vote, you know, because I'm having trouble with X, Y, and Z, with enforcement or with my road or whatever, and I'll just put it on town meeting and then they'll have to do it. You know, I think there's almost people like they're trying to, you know, it's sort of, they're trying to offload, you know, I don't know, they're trying to get somebody else to do it for them, and it's kind of magical thinking sometimes. Like people have to do it themselves, you know, we all have to do it, but.
Well, that almost feels like the town council, that some people are just, well, if we
Oh, yeah.
switch to town council, that will just solve it.
What that's gonna
I
do,
won't have to go to town meeting anymore.
what the people that say that to me are saying really, Don, is that I won't have to wait 6 months or a year. I'll be able to get a decision in 2 weeks and I'll be able to influence it. And we won't have full information, so I'm gonna be able to get what I want in 2 weeks instead of having to wait a year. And go to 2 different town meetings before I can force my demand on. You know, that's sort of like, that's what some of the people are talking to me, that's what I'm sensing. You know, they just wanna get to what they need faster and they think they'll be able to, you know, sort of
Yeah.
pressure that process faster.
So it feels like we pulled back to more of our, how to do what we're doing incrementally better, rather than, you know, my idea, which was to come at this from a completely different angle. Is there another comp plan? When do comp plans happen?
That's an NPVC issue. Comes out of the planning office. You know, we're doing a master plan is somewhat different than a comp plan, although they're kind of the same, but.
The master plan is underway.
Yeah.
The like. Structuring of it, that might be a good joint meeting with the planning
what I was thinking.
and the board. You know, that's the only topic is workshop. Like, think what's going on with it, how are you doing the outreach to other boards and all that?
You know, maybe it's just as simple as introducing this idea of value decision-making at each of these joint meetings that we're scheduling. So that we broaden the introduction of the concept to other boards and committees, and that would be a low list, right? That maybe we put together like a little video presentation or something that gets shared at the first joint meeting we have.
You can watch Sean's video.
Or they can just share John's video.
We should put that up on the town
Yeah.
site.
And maybe that's
Social
the
media.
way
It's
to
really good.
introduce this idea without it having to really do anything.
I like Libby's idea on this of saying, okay, because how are we gonna do the public outreach? You know, for the master plan, how are we gonna do public outreach? How can we help? How can we be involved if necessary? So that the public feels like they have an opportunity in all the different sections. You know, that's been one of the complaints over the last couple of renditions that, you know, they're not involved as much, you know, and so I think, how do we do that? And give everyone a voice? That would be helpful, I think.
Well, and certainly our meetings are the ones that are probably most watched.
Yeah, because people even listen to them on the radio.
Yeah, so having, I mean, we're heading down this road and continue with the joint meetings and, you know, and for that purpose, that people tend to tune in more on Wednesday night, so, okay, well,
So if I'll just summarize, make sure I've got next steps right, it sounds like you all are kind of committing to being a little bit more intentional, being open to a question from others, being open to saying what your values are when you're deciding. And then introducing this concept when you have joint meetings, like we had the big five or whatever it was last year, kind of using this as a framework for a conversation with other boards. That's kind of the next steps. Okay, wonderful.
I like to close meetings with it too,
Mm-hmm.
and start a meeting with it, and then as you wrap it up, remind people that this is what we focus, this is the level you're trying to get to.
yeah, or even ask them, was there anything in this conversation that feels like that,
Yeah,
that thinking,
You gotta go back to their.
yeah.
I have another video of that I had John do, that's cups and community building, and the idea that everyone has a cup, but people's cups are different sizes. And what fills your cup and how quickly it overflows, and then you start giving back as a concept, and I close a lot with that. It plays on some of the same values, but it is conceptually, it's that if we want to build community, then we need to figure out how to fill each other's cups. That's really what it's about.
If we were gonna have a conversation, try to have just a general conversation, that or that with a car parked on it is a pretty good framework for a conversation. And the reason being that the car represents one person who's taking the rights away from everybody else and not, you know, et cetera, and should that be there, and should that be for free? Or should there be a charge? Should it block the street? Is, you know, is that fair? Like, that's the kind of, those things, if you wanted to have this as a general conversation, that's not a bad way to talk about it.
Okay.
You know, because then that is something people can all understand, and people look at it a lot of times from their own personal standpoint. But you want to widen it to like, what's the common good on this? You know, what's the impact of, you know, and not, what are the trade-offs, and what's the impact of not enforcing parking on sidewalks? You know, we lose all like our gardens and all the things I always talk about, but that to me would be, you know, and the community doesn't want paid parking. Well, if you have free, you know, not paid parking, and, you know, you end up with what, you know, creep and everything else, all those things are interconnected, and they're at a level that people could understand.
I should be able to take that picture later today.
Maybe the pothole isn't getting filled because
Yeah.
they're too busy repairing.
There you go, exactly.
The
Oh, wait,
Legos
wait,
and the
wait.
sidewalk, correct?
On the potholes. 99 times out of 100, when I say to people, you can report a pothole online at the DPW and they come and fix it in a matter of days. They're like, really? And I say, yeah, they don't drive around, you know,
Looking for 'em.
looking for potholes on the street. You have to let them know. And people are shocked that that's available, you know, it's, oh.
Spoon fed, spoon fed. So, we have a few minutes left before we would wrap up for today, and we said we'd just check in. You know, you all, there's no change in the five. There's a change in leadership, and so you have, Brooke has come in as chair, and is Matt the vice chair? So I guess kind of just checking in terms of the procedures, Rick, this is the 20 minutes right here. Kind of procedures, the way you all work together, anything kind of that you want to, anything you want to talk about that's, you know, you're struggling with, that's not working, anything you'd like to see different, anything that you hope Brooke will do that Dawn did, or that Brooke will do that Dawn didn't do, kind of what is it that you're looking for in the leadership of your board as you govern together for the next year? Tom, thank
I think
you.
a couple little things. I think, one thing, and this ties in, I know something that Libby is working on in town admin is kind of the Gov 101 stuff. I think there's a lot of there's some confusion out there about what the select board's roles are and like what our duties and our scope is. And this sort of ties into everything from the extreme, like, oh, why can't you just stop cars coming over on the fair? You know, that's sort of the extreme version. And then there's other things that people may think we do or we don't do. And that ties into trust and transparency and all the other stuff. So I think I'm just gonna throw this out there, maybe at one select board meeting where we had a light agenda, maybe we could just talk about what we do. Just a thought, I mean, maybe no one will watch it but at least it's out there and maybe it could be before town meeting and we could clarify what our role at town meeting is. I know that's slightly amorphous because we talk, we sometimes don't talk because it's the vote, it's up to the voters and et cetera. And then one thing I think the board could do is, there's, as we all know, it's why we all live here, there's a lot of great stuff that happens in the community. When I was working in the rep's office, Dylan's term for it was sunshine, he called it sunshine letters, but I think we could highlight some achievements here and there at the board. Of saying like, oh, these students got a scholarship, or this sports team or whatever, that's part of the community, the best of the community here. And I think a lot of people look to us as the top policymaking board. And that by us acknowledging them means something to out there in the community. So I would just sort of throw that out as a general.
That's a really good idea.
Thank you.
Scholars.
Others?
You know, do talk about reaching out to everybody, and we have a survey out right now about the strategic plan that's actually getting very good response rate according to surveys. I just want to share some of the stuff. Florenci is astonished at some of the responses because it's anonymous. And she's like, how do we address these and how do we build this community? Well, these are just some of the responses today. Vehicles only for homeowners and year-round residents. Clean up the roads, put trash cans on all the beaches and walking areas. Again, people don't understand which beaches are ours, which they aren't ours. Have regulations on how many vehicles and employees a small business can have. Nantucket for Nantucketers only. Deport all the illegal immigrants. Spelled incorrectly, by the way. Have more food in our grocery stores. We need more places for our kids to play. Kick out the Mexicans, but leave the tacos.
Ouch.
I mean, I'll stop reading, 'cause I mean, it goes on like this, so many, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And we're trying to gauge a community and create a community, but we still have, we have a challenge. So,
So that's anonymous, face to face is different.
absolutely.
Yeah, but an anonymity allows people to say what's really on their mind, and what's really on their mind is what's just driving their decision-making, their votes, their actions, their relationships with others. It's really, and if anyone didn't think that existed until this morning, oh, yeah. There's a lot of work to be done. Hence my argument for values-based conversation. So, we had tried doing a periodic agenda item and to ask the board if they had agenda things they wanted to put on. I'm not sure the purpose of doing it in the public meeting. I just want you all to know that if there's an item or a topic that you think we're not addressing or we haven't brought up on an agenda, please let me know. Let us know. I think Dawn was always open to that, but I just want to reiterate that you are welcome to text me, email me, either through Libby or direct to me if there's a topic that you feel we should address, and then we can talk about how to do it, how to formulate an agenda item that works for that topic. And whether it's issue specific or more generic conversation type agenda item.
Okay. So open door to let the leadership know what you want to talk about on agendas. Anything else important from your perspective? Like is there anything you need from your colleagues to help you during your time as chair?
I don't know what I don't know yet, but Dawn did a great job of helping me prepare. Yeah, I just want, I like the collaborative nature of how this board operates. I think there's people in the community who love to see us fighting more. I'm not sure the purpose of fighting. I think healthy discussion, disagreement. And again, the reason I like this values thing is when we disagree, we elevate it to why we value one choice over the other. I think it's just a different kind of conversation. I think we do it pretty well. Yeah, I want everyone to feel heard. It doesn't mean I'll necessarily vote, and then you want me to vote. But, being heard is not the same thing as getting what you want. And I would say that at a board level and a community level. And
Is
I
it
will do my
vision-
best to explain why.
Is it visioning that you're looking for from us?
To some extent, yeah.
Sort of what I'm thinking is sort of the vision of what is Nantucket 5 or 10 years from now,
Yes.
like that. It's almost sitting that, if I'm trying to think of how do you put a box around, how do you, I think you're sort of values and things sounds a little squishy, but you're saying, okay, we're trying to get a vision for how,
Yeah.
that mimic those values.
And I think you arrive at a vision by starting with values and working your way down to policy, right? I think that's how, now you finally circled around public hearing. There was a meeting at the Dreamland a few years ago called Nantucket 2025 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, maybe that's what we need to do, but not just a one-off event, but
We kind of started with that with the strategic
Yeah.
plan.
okay.
And then we went back to, okay, what like actual goals and action
So
items,
maybe it's
but
time.
visions in
We actually
every
called it
category.
2030.
And maybe those two questions we had you all answer, what's precious, what's true today that you want to make sure is still true 10 years from now? And then what's not true today that you hope would be? I mean, that's how we came up with the structure of your plan. Maybe those are questions you'd like to invite the community to participate in.
Look at the aspirational statements.
Yeah, kind of really focus in on those aspirational statements. And I would say that is a relatively common step in community engagement around strategic planning. That is very common, that what people would want to do is test those statements and then develop that. So
maybe that's what we do is the next step of our strategic planning process is to go out again to the community and bring in more.
What are the questions on the survey?
I don't have it in front
Should
of
we
me.
be expanding that at all? Might be worth
Or
looking
creating something, yeah.
or adding to it.
Well, the intention would be, it was done by Zen City, so they have like methodology, keep it to like simple, like 7 or 8 questions, so people actually fill it out. And then you build another survey, which we had money in for this coming year,
Okay.
to build on that, where we're hearing some of this stuff. There's a lot about the island's filthy, we need to litter control, we need litter messaging, like, so there's a theme around that, so that one's easy. Some of the other stuff, probably not.
The best thing we did at the comp plan back then was consensus building along some of the, like we all do sometimes, where we put the tags, we did with the public, where they put the tags up, yep. And I think what you're talking about, that's sort of, and that could be part of the, could be part of the master plan process or another comp plan process, something like that, where the vision is bubbling up from the public, and I think and how people vision is different, like, Brooke, you do it from, your goals and you turn it into vision. Other people, like I do it backwards, I do it from here and come backwards.
and to you, it's not backwards.
No, I know.
But so it's, but
Yeah,
that, just that word,
Backwards for
right?
Brooke who does it
It's
wrong,
backward,
yeah.
right, right,
Yes.
right. Brooke actually does it backwards, no, but that is a great example of people just approach an issue very differently.
Yeah.
Some people need to go in the weeds to see the bigger picture, and other people have to have the big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to do both.
All right. So you're not wrong, Brooke.
So maybe what we do is we circle back
Talk
around
about
to this
strategic
and our
planning.
strategic planning.
Mhm. Yeah, we can talk about
What's
some
the date for that?
October, it's on my calendar. It is later in October this year,
22nd.
yeah.
October 22nd.
Yeah.
In this week.
I hope too many small details in there, right?
I'm tired. That's what I got in there now.
Look at that.
Nothing else
There it
there.
is, October 22nd.
What day of the week is it?
The
Yeah, what day of the week
Tuesday,
is- oh, that's-
9 to 1. It's on your calendars.
Yeah.
Yes, at least it's on mine from Erica, so.
Anyway,
Okay,
thanks everyone for indulging my obsession, dream, there you go. Vision.
It's a great vision.
And we'll see, you know, I do tend to start with, you know, and then figure out. So I feel like we've done a good job today about getting pragmatic, efficient
mm-hmm,
around
balance of values.
how we might weave this thinking more outwardly.
Yeah.
And into our regular existing process rather than getting. Process. Excellent.
We'll just let other people wrap up parting comment like Brooke just did and go around and give everyone a chance. Tom?
Yeah, I think this was good. I think the goals are extremely worthy. It's just how we get there and being mindful of all the things we need to do, town staff, the time, all of our time, another meeting, minutes, like, you know, postings, all the myriad of things, but I think the values-based decision-making is really important for what we do as a grounding principle, the bedrock principle. So I think this is a worthy thing for us to investigate further in our strategic planning process.
Thank you. Malcolm?
Yeah, I like this, this is the way I think. I mean, this gives me a model. And I'm actually following it. I just didn't know I was following.
Hmm.
And this is extremely helpful. I thought it was great. I'm again repeat, I think we need to have more public outreach in the community. That's the biggest criticism I got.
Thank you. Matt?
I need less public outreach in the community. They wake me up and then my phone is going at all hours of the day and night. No, I'm sort of joking. It's, you know, I respond and so I get a lot of it, but I think, you know, I think we're on the right path, so.
Dawn?
Yeah, I mean, I get the impression that people are looking for a little bit more explanation of our values, of our planning, of our process, and even what we're responsible for. And I mean, it is hard to get people's attention sometimes unless there's something wrong.
Mhm.
But I think we could create some additional forums and ways to communicate and to, you know, try and highlight where maybe try and, you know, answer to the lack of transparency that people complain about and lack of being heard, but with still framing the conversation in just because you're still being heard, it's just you're not getting the answer changed to what you want it to be.
Maybe that, Don has a good point. Maybe that's what Brooke can be doing, is saying, this is the vote. Here's, you know, this is why we did it. Here are the concerns that we heard and we, you know, and we're addressing those these way, or we can't address those because of this. Maybe it's a little bit more of just like sort of a better explanation earlier, as opposed to waiting for everyone to yell and scream at what we did wrong and then have to explain it later. You know, maybe do it more at the beginning.
And I
That's
do
the
think
why.
people respond to that.
You know, your comment, Tom, about a column in the newspaper or in the media is not a bad one. Like if I were to write, you know, I don't know,
Summary from last week or something.
I
But-
don't think I could commit to anything, but I could, like, a topic of the month and sort of explain the decision-making process and who has authority.
But maybe it is a TikTok
I'm telling you, I just. need
instead of a column,
20-year-olds.
right? Where are those? Where are your granddaughters?
They're too young.
Too young. Daughters.
It's
Yeah.
my 31-year-old.
There you go.
We want to do what, Don suggesting after a vote taken at select board meeting, ask people there to say why they voted that way.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot. I want to invite you all to
Do that as part of your comment.
share
Yeah.
Where's the appropriate moment to do that? As we're leading into a vote, you're thinking around what you're evaluating in your head as we go to a vote, opportunities for that. I feel like I sometimes do that, like I kind of circle back in a way. I remember somebody saying about Melissa Murphy, I feel like she's going a certain way and then she goes the other way. And I'm like, no, she's having a conversation out loud with herself as she's arriving at her decision. And I feel like sometimes I do that a little bit. And then,
Well, I do think that's something the chair can do. I think John did this too, but kind of very intentionally say, this is what I've heard from my colleagues. This is, especially if you go last, if you go last, then you
Yeah.
can do that wrap up and acknowledge, and people can correct, or
Yeah.
you could also invite comment and, do you want to explain to people how you came to your decision? You can always invite without, if people feel
Yeah,
like they're
putting
put
it
on
on
the
the
spot. And just know that even having this conversation, it's coming from a good place, right? It's not coming from wanting to put you on a spot, but wanting people to understand.
Yeah.
How are we coming to these decisions? Rick?
Well, I think probably the most, the comment that sticks out to me the most is Tom's about, let's try and build community in our meetings and a little bit of kumbaya. I have to say, it's a little bit personal, but I like Nantucket less now that I live here as opposed to vacationing here. And I think that's probably because I just see more of the divisiveness around town, and I'd like to see if we could figure out a way to build community in just little ways like that. I'll just leave it at that. I have a couple other comments.
Rick?
All right, John, a little bit
Okay.
negative comments, but I kind of also plan on what Tom said about like the government 101 about the select board as well. It's very apparent that the public, they just don't pay attention until they pay attention. They don't know how town meeting works. They don't know how the select board works. And I don't know how we get that out there, but I know we're trying. We have some ideas in mind, but that'd be a good goal for this year.
It's valuable for them to understand what decisions lie with administration. too.
Yes, the charter.
Because
basically.
sometimes they definitely mix the roles.
Sure. Libby?
Not only do they mix the roles, there seems to be a, feeling among some that collaboration between the select board and the town administration is bad and shouldn't be happening. And in fact, if people were to look at how other towns operate, they would find that we are very lucky that we have a very good collaboration between the board and administration. And I don't know why you wouldn't want to have that, because if you don't, then nothing's going to get done well. We are unbelievably busy in town administration, and I think you all know that, and things pop up constantly that become of the, 12 priority ones. Now, every week there's a new one. This week it's the right wells. Last week it was the right wells. Next week it might still be the right wells, or it might be something else. And we're constantly having to internally reprioritize things to get at the top thing. And I really take to heart when people say, like, town administration is running the town and it should be the board. That is complete crap. And when the select board wants something to get done, you tell us. And our job is to tell you what it's going to take to do that. And there's only so many of us in town admin. We're already working well over 40 hours a week, and I am not complaining about that. That's just how it works in upper level town management. But we can't do it all at once. And priorities have to be selected, and our charter has what's known as a strong town manager. And if the board doesn't want town admin to be doing something, or the board wants more involvement in the day to day, then we actually get it. But that's not really how the charter is laid out. So I like the idea of, our Government 101 on-demand series that we've been working on really focuses on each department and what they do, but now that we're talking about it, we probably need a board one, a board video, and maybe a charter video. We're also talking about a town meeting.
Governance.
Kind of thing that has the moderator talking about how town meeting runs, and, it's just interesting to me that sort of all of a sudden, the past couple of years, there's all these questions about how town meeting works and, what does and doesn't come before town meeting. It's like, all of a sudden, people are either woken up to what happens there, or, I don't know, maybe it goes in cycles where people are paying more attention.
It's issue based.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, they're unhappy with certain things that are happening. They're seeing some of we're fraying at the edges. And they're trying to say, how can we not fray at the edges? That's what I think is happening.
Anyway, I appreciate the, discussion.
Libby, would you say one example of that would be after the short-term rental articles did not make it through town meeting, we met, et cetera, happened, and then suddenly it was September 17th, and you had to come up with the list of what's gonna happen for that. That was something that you had to majorly shift gears and spend time, right? Because that had to be set, or there was gonna be a called special with no time, and that wouldn't have been, okay.
So can I just add a little bit to that? So busy is one thing, but the problem isn't busy. The problem is the risk it introduces into the work that you're doing. So you don't have time to sit down and make sure that the select board, that we've gotten through our due diligence at 31 Western in time for you guys to make an intelligent decision. It's the, are we looking in depth enough at the New England development proposal for this whole area here? Are we crunching the numbers on it before we make a recommendation? And it's not that we all work hard. It doesn't matter. We enjoy working hard. But for me, it's the risk we introduce by piling things on top of things, and we just can't. You can only get them good enough. You can't get them to where you really want to feel comfortable about a decision.
Yeah, I like Rick's point. We've talked about this quite a bit internally. It's the complexity of the issues that takes a lot of time to do the due diligence that Matt's talking about, and to present all aspects of an item. And it just takes a lot of time. Sometimes we need outside expertise to help develop something like we did with 31 Western, but it doesn't take 20 minutes.
Yeah, and the bigger it is, the harder it is for you guys to do it. And the less likely we are to have something actionable that we see all the different signs on.
Yeah, at least quickly.
Get quickly, or even in a long period on certain things. And so then that becomes policy, but it's not really policy because we've got all that other stuff we have to understand to even set the policy. And so I think I think you hit, sort of hit the nail on the head on that. And this is some of this is a factor of where, what is happening on Nantucket right now. I've been explaining to people now that things are not linear. Like you don't add one sewer and your sewer is a little bit bigger each time. It goes and goes and goes till it's broken, and then you have a big, huge expense. And a lot of the stuff that we are dealing with is a result of, sort of we're growing and growing and growing, and now it's a big, huge, there's all these things coming due at once. And I think that's, we knew it was coming, but anyway.
Janet, and then we'll let you guys leave.
I have the advantage of sitting 100 miles away most of the time. I stay pretty connected and listen to the town annual meeting on my phone while watching Jeopardy.
The same thing.
And there are times when I can tell how stressed things are without ever having a conversation, because I can just feel how busy it is. And most recently, one of those things was the Jepson sculpture. And I saw it went up, it was beautiful, but I said, that's not gonna last because there's a liability, there's no policy. And it came down and everybody was pointing fingers at everybody else. And it's because there wasn't time to get to Jepson or Jepson, whatever, to get the word out about how these things work. And there's a lot of that conversation needs to go on. I also appreciate Tom's comment that anytime a decision gets made at this level by the head of the duck, the feet of the duck have to go hold off fast underneath to make it happen. So there would be a lot of work to pull off these forums and the like, and I'm not sure that it's, I think probably what would in an ideal world, you'd have robots who could set up meetings and make phone calls and do all that kind of administrative stuff that will have that to happen, but that's a good day's work to set up one forum. Doesn't mean it shouldn't happen, but. Every time it is, and when a decision gets made to change it by an hour or something, then it all goes on. So I just would say that it's a busy place, and from what I can see, everybody's doing a great job, not just satisfactory, but.
Well, thank you all very much and we'll see you in October, if not before then. So appreciate your time today.
Good, thank you.
So if I have an agenda, it's like to make sure. All the way back here.
Oh, yeah, we just need to.
Oh, motion to adjourn.
Second, sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Okay.
The, HEC